Hi, boys and girls. Today is May 7th, Thursday, right? And it's a beautiful day. I'm sitting out here in my backyard enjoying the nice weather. And it's time to start a new book, isn't it? We finished Boxcar Children. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, there are more Boxcar Children stories available. So when the library opens, you can check one out because they're pretty easy to read. First graders can read that level. It's pretty fun. So today I'm going to start a new story, one that my dad liked to read to me. And guess what? His mom and dad like to read it to him. I don't even think this story is in print anymore. My dad gave me a copy of it, just in a folder. Yep. And it has a few pictures, but not very many. You have to use your imagination a lot with this story, and that's kind of why I like it. Just use your pictures in your brain as you listen to the story. And if it helps, get a piece of paper and draw pictures. That helps me sometimes pay attention to what's happening. I'm going to move my thing back just a bit because I think the sun's going to be creeping in on me pretty quick here. There we go. Okay, nice. Get cozy. Here we go. Once there was a little boy, and his name was Dicky Bird, and he had an elephant, and a camel, and a giraffe, 6 wooden soldiers, and a real live dog. And this is the story of Dicky Bird's elephants, or his elephant. Dicky Bird's elephant was a most winsome creature. He was about as big as a hot water bottle and all made of soft gray flannel. He had 2 black shoe buttons for eyes and 2 ivory knitting needles for tusks. And he had 2 floppy bits of gray flannel for ears and a bit of gray string for a tail. And on all occasions, he wore a magnificent blanket, all made of the reddest of red velvet and lavishly decorated with rubies, diamonds, and emeralds, all made of the very finest quality of glass. And around the edges of the blanket was long, thick gold fringe. He was indeed a gorgeous spectacle. And that was just what the garden elves thought when one summer night they climbed up the pink rose bushes that grew beside Dicky Bird's door and looked in at Dicky Bird's nursery window and saw Dicky Bird's elephant lying on the floor in a patch of moonlight. If there are any elephants in your, or there are elves, sorry, let's try that again. If there are any elves in your garden, you know that their behavior is sometimes, oh, very, very bad indeed. The bad behavior of just one garden elf is worse than the worst behavior of 3 of the baddest children you know. And there were 3 garden elves looking into Dicky Bird's window. What do you suppose they did when they saw the elephant? They looked at each other's eyes, nodded their head, and slowly they crept quietly through the window into Dicky Bird's nursery. And one of them took hold of the elephant's trunk. One of them took hold of his hind legs, and one of them took hold of his front legs, and then quietly they lifted the elephant up and tiptoed softly to the window with him. With great effort, they got him up on the window sill. Then, quiet as mice, they began to climb down the rose bush with him. And Dicky Bird would never have known what had become of his elephant if one of the elves hadn't accidentally stepped on a thorn. The squeak he made woke up Dicky Bird, and he ran to the window to see what all that noise was about. And there, by the light of the calm summer moon, he saw those 3 naughty elves running away with his elephant. Now, Dicky Bird was not the boy to let a thing like that happen without doing something about it. And he got out of his night clothes and into his day clothes with such celerity that would have astonished his nurse. Celerity, that's a tough word, huh? Look it up. I bet it means something about quick and precise and without effort, just did it as much fast as he could. And by the time those elves had reached the ground, Dicky Bird was halfway down the stairs. Here's a picture, a black and white picture. So you have to kind of look closely at it. Can you find the elves in the picture? Yep, and there's Dicky Bird looking out his window, and those elves are running away with Dicky Bird's elephant. Yeah. Turn the page, let's see, and By the time they were halfway down the garden path, Dicky Bird was opening the back door. The garden was quiet and dark except where the moon cast a pale light. The trees looked black and tall, and the air was cold. Everything was so hushed and strange that Dicky Bird was just a little bit frightened and was about wondering if he had better go back to bed, when all at once he caught sight of something sparkling halfway down the garden path. It was the elephant's blanket. Down the garden path went Dicky Bird as fast as a kitten chasing a spool. Past the lily pool he ran, where the water lilies gleamed white in the moonlight, and on toward the garden gate. The elves saw him coming, and they ran harder than ever. But they were smaller than Dicky Bird, and they had an elephant to carry besides, so he gained on them so fast that by the time that they reached the garden gate, he was almost at their heels. But just as he was to stretch forth his hands to catch them, they suddenly swerved and darted in amongst the rose bushes and at the side of the path, disappearing behind a heap of stones in a corner of the garden. Dicky Bird had often seen that heap of stones in the daytime, and it was just a plain and ordinary everyday heap of stones. But now when he ran up to it, what do you suppose he found? Set into one side of that stone heap was a little green door, about as high as a ruler, with a doorbell and a doorknob and a slit for letters, just like a real front door. Dicky Bird had never been so astonished in his life, and while he stood there, a light went on up inside the stone heap, and he saw that beside the door was a tiny window hung with white, ruffled curtains. And I certainly never saw that before, thought Dicky Bird. Then Dicky Bird stooped down and looked in the window. Inside was a tiny little room furnished like a kitchen, with a tiny little stove in one corner and a tiny little sink in another, and 3 chairs and a tiny little white enamel table in the third. And in the middle of the floor was Dicky Bird's elephant with the 3 garden elves standing beside him. They were talking together in low tones and seemed to be planning what to do next. Finally, one of them clapped their hands and cried in a little squeaky voice, "I know! We'll make him come alive and go for a ride." "Good, good!" cried the other ones. "Let's do the magic now." Dicky Bird had never seen any magic before, so he watched carefully to see how they did it. First, he saw them put a kettle of water on the stove, and soon as it boiled, they threw in 1 apple blossom for a moonbeam, 12 dewdrops. There's a picture. Let me just see it while I'm reading it here. 12 dewdrops wrapped in a rose leaf and a caraway seed. There must have been something very powerful about that caraway seed, for no sooner did it touch the water than a thick cloud of steam rose and completely filled the room, so that Dicky Bird couldn't see what happened next. But he heard the 3 elves chanting incantations, and then came a great scramble and a sound of chairs knocking over, and when the mist cleared, Dicky Bird was amazed to see that an elephant was standing in the middle of the room and waving his trunk, just the way they do in the circus. Then one of the garden elves ran and opened the door, and they all climbed on the elephant's back. "Go along," they cried, kicking their heels against his side. With a funny little grunt, the elephant started forward. Dicky Bird watched quietly while the elephant squeezed out of the little green door, tramped through the rose bushes and out into the garden path, where he began eating some blades of grass that were growing in a crack. Go along," cried the elves, kicking their heels against his side. And the little elephant said, "Ugh," regretfully, and obediently trotted up the path. He carried the elves all the way to Dicky Bird's house, and then turned and carried them all the way back to the garden gate. "Now, go faster," cried the elves, and he started up the path again. But the elephant did not want to go faster, so he kept going the same as before. Then one of the elves leaned over and picked up a twig for a whip. "Go faster," he cried, and he struck the elephant with the whip. And that made the elephant very angry, and instead of going faster, he stopped and he stood right up on his hind legs, and all those 3 elves slid down his back and down his tail and landed on the garden path with 3 bumps. Then the little elephant gave himself a little shake, just the way a dog does when he comes out of the water, and trotted off up the path. He stopped by the lily pool, where the grass was long and thick, and began eating it. When the elves found themselves on the ground, it was their turn to be angry. Catch him, they cried, and they scrambled to their feet and began running after the elephant. But the elephant did not run away. He stayed just where he was, but his little shoe button eyes twinkled, and he reached his trunk over into the lily pool and filled it full of water. Then he turned and he stood waiting for the elves, and when they got quite close to him, what do you suppose he did? He raised his trunk and he squirted that water all over them. The elves were simply sopping. Well, they couldn't stay around all night in their wet clothes, so they had to leave the elephant and go home to their little elf house and put on dry clothes and put their wet clothes to dry before the kitchen fire. And they each had to take a large dose of medicine to keep from catching the cold. And as soon as Dicky Bird saw the elephants were safe inside the house, he rolled a big stone in front of their door so that it would take them some time to be able to get out again. And then he went after the elephant. Now the elephant was having a beautiful time. He had eaten all the grass he wanted, and he was rolling on his back in the moonlight just like a kitten. And he knew Dicky Bird when he came up to him, and he ran up to him and he rubbed his head against Dicky Bird's knee. And the two played together for a long, long time, till at last they were both got tired, and Dicky Bird picked up the elephant and carried him softly up to bed, where he fell asleep with him in his arms. And in the morning, when Dicky Bird woke up, there was the camel just where he had left it the night before, and there was the giraffe just where he had left it the night before, and the 6 wooden soldiers were just where he had left them. But the flannel elephant was not where he had left him the night before. It was lying on Dicky Bird's pillow. So you see, it wasn't at all a dream. And though the elephant was just flannel elephant again, there was such a merry twinkle in his shoe-button eyes that Dicky Belt felt sure that some other night he would come alive again and play with him in the moonlight. Quite the imagination, isn't it? Good. Do you have a good imagination? Tell me about something you like to pretend is alive, and I will look forward to hearing about it. Have a great day, and we will see you tomorrow.